So this is about what we try to understand what a product, a project and process is in the context of agile. So since we're doing a bit of work with test-driven development, and also we're starting some new projects, uh, I thought I'll introduce these three terms because yeah. So the reason why I asked you all to get some building blocks of something that has multiple parts and all that is just to get an idea of what a product is. What we do in at Keeneye as software services is that we help our clients build a product that they can use, sell, or yeah, either they use it internally or they sell it. They sell it to third parties. So anyway, either way, it's part of their business process, and uh, it's not our internal. Maybe we will have our internal products also, but we build on behalf of somebody else. Okay, so each product is different. So we first need to understand what we are going to build. The product that we are going to build, we need to have an understanding. And the agile process, which we'll talk on a later day, has uh, people or teams to handle who owns the product, and then what features and so on. But in general, we should have an idea of what we are going to build. The custodians of this is a different topic, and we will discuss that later, right? But just to understand what we are going to build, everybody should have an understanding, not just the product owners, the developers, also everybody should understand. Even the client should have a common understanding of this is what we are going to build. Okay, so product has features, right? So for example, if you have a bottle or a rice cooker or whatever, it's got certain things, certain abstract features. It's got it'll have it's got functionality also, like it's got a purpose. The rice cooker is made to cook something, a bottle is to hold some liquid in it, or some substance in it. In this case, the Lego house is to pretend play with I don't know, with the soldiers, and there's a dragon there. I don't know. Anyway, so it's got its purpose. It's got features that uh, you would identify, and these are part of the business. Meaning, if a client wants to build this particular kind of Lego castle, that's fine. And if we undertake to build it, we will eventually have to do it. Whether what they do with it is actually, well, we might be interested because it gives insight, and we can make suggestions and things like that. But if they want this and we agree to build it, then we will have to build it based on the features that they have described, right? The product also has properties, meaning it's got, if it's a physical product, it will have weight, dimensions and things like that. If it's an abstract, if it's a virtual one, like the software that we build, it'll have various properties that it's on. It's cloud based. It's of a particular capacity. It needs a particular. It needs things to run on, and the tools, it's technology that it's built on, all that attributes to the properties that it constitutes. Okay, then the product will have a look and feel, unless we are asked to build some middleware, right? But either way, if it's interacting with a client, it has a look and feel. So how the product feels when you use it, and how it looks, it's part of what we're going to build. Okay, and limitations. There are things it can do. There are things it can't do. Okay, and it's got a value. So we can't, we should, if you know, if the client shows this picture and says, I want this built with Lego parts, and says, my budget is this much, the product shouldn't exceed this particular value. And, you know, if there's, you know, Lego is expensive, and then, you know, you might have to find those Chinese building blocks to make this, but either way, it'll have a value, it'll have a price, and we'll have to figure out what we're going to do to meet those price and value requirements, right? And it's got a lifespan. It should work for a certain period described by the client, by not just the client, actually, even we have a take on that. So we can say this particular version of this product can last this long, and then when the technology expires, or, you know, when materials break, or when things get clogged, we need to repair or fix or upgrade, or, you know, do something along that line to extend the lifespan of the product. Okay. Any questions on this? You have so the point of all this is to for you to understand what we are building in a project, or in say, or given some task to do. What you're building might be a small part. You might be working on, you know, the gate of the dungeon, or just the lid of a bottle, but you're making a bottle. So that product that you're building, the bigger picture, the bigger the bigger picture, that you should have an understanding of. That's the point I'm trying to make. Any questions on this? Guys, can you hear me at least? Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, can hear Shehal. No questions.
All right. Okay. So then we get to the point of, okay, so now that we
can hear you, Shehal, very clearly. No problem.
Okay, cool, nice. So once we've understood what we are going to build, see, all this is on a high level, right? So we are not going into, we need to understand the product on a high level, because the details will follow, and we will talk about that in another presentation. But the fact that we are building a castle with dragons, or with its rice cooker or whatever, that particular thing that we're going to build, we need to have an idea of. Okay. Its details with its properties, features, look and feel, there might be small modifications, might be changes, might even take a massive turn on. We are not building castles, we are going to build towers instead. Okay, so fine. So the client, the business is making a decision like that, then we'll have to adapt, right? So either way, what we are going to build is something that we need to have an idea of. Then we look at how are we going to build it. So if it's a Lego castle, we're going to build it with Lego, right? But if you're going to build, I mean, yeah, if you're going to build something else like a rice cooker, we can't build it out of Lego. So we'll have to, you know, figure out what we're going to build that with. So the right material, instructions, and skills that we need to build it, we need to have an idea of if we are going to build a particular product. Whether we are going to stick to that is a different issue. But to have a to come up with this is all on a high level. We are not going down to details of how many, you know, we're not doing build of materials or anything like that. We're not doing BOQs or anything like that. We're not looking at how many blue blocks we need, how many blue blocks with 4x2, or you know, how many pieces like that we need. We're not looking at all that. We just on a high level, what materials, instructions, or basically technology. So what technology, how we're going to organize our stack, what things could we build this particular product out of. So it could be that we could build it out of multiple materials. We can, with multiple skill sets. It doesn't have to be one way that we can build it, but just to get an idea on a high level, how we're going to build it is important. Okay, so um, this is so at any stage of your project product development, uh, you need to have this idea, the bigger picture, basically how we're building it, or how we are going to build it, or how do we build it. Okay, and this process of constantly understanding what we're building and how we're going to build it helps you with handling your day-to-day project work, because it keeps things in perspective. It keeps you, it checks if you're on track, if you're way off, and with the solution, then you might you might be able to flag and even tell the client, say, look, this is not what we should be doing. We might need to change it, or we might need to change our approach. Yeah. Um, yeah. So then comes to the project. So now we understand what we're going to build and how we're going to build it. So the project is how the means, or the way, or the mechanism in which we build the product. Okay, so a project will have a timeline. There's a timeline to build the product. Okay, there's a budget to build the product, and the project will have goals. So we might not build the entire product, but we will build part of it, or a version of it, the first version of it, or a sub version of it, maybe a smaller, maybe a prototype, I don't know, whatever it is. We will build a version of the product, and uh, those are set as goals. And there are stakeholders, people who we need to interact with when we are when we are building the product. So it could be the client. The client might have consultants and people who check. There might be third parties. There might be other vendors. There might be suppliers who provide us Lego parts and things like that. So uh, stakeholders are also important to identify. So these the timeline, budget, goals, and stakeholders we need to have an idea of when we are dealing when we are in the project. So the project basically is managing all this so that we build the so that we get to build a product and we achieve our goals. Okay, so the goals also would mean that okay, we can build a version of the product within the budget, and if we exceed the budget, if it's how much we can exceed, and timeline, how much we can negotiate and maybe extend the timeline. All that is part of how we manage our goals. Okay, with the stakeholders. Okay, we also might have we'll also have internal stakeholders like admin and finance and other and now we have audit group and plus the tech leads, all that. So all these stakeholders you need to be aware of, and the reason why we need to understand there are stakeholders is for transparency, so that they are all aware of what we're doing. Okay, so we'll get to that after this. Okay, so anything on the project on this? Are you with? So basically, I took a twist from product to this. So are you? I don't know. Do you have any? Do you have a different opinion, or what's your take on this up to this part? Maybe then proceed then. Maybe we can talk about that after this. The last time, yeah. So now that we have So there are various kinds of projects, right? There are types of projects that we can project structures or patterns, if you want to call it, I don't know, templates, I guess, or methods that you can use to manage or handle the timeline, budgets, goals, and other things that uh, constitute a project. Do you have other elements, other things that constitute a project? Maybe other than these, something else that you can think of that attributes to a project? Because the next thing I'm going to talk about is the process. Or maybe you want to wait till then. Okay, I'll talk about the process then, and then we can talk about.
How about the scope of the project, Shehal?
Okay, scope. Okay. Cool. So scope would mean uh, uh, boundaries and what we're going to build, what we're not going to build. Anything to add on that, Mithuna?
Yeah, I mean, like we might not have a very how to say a strict boundaries as in such, but some sort of idea of like which we are going to stick, because there is also a tendency that we can go all over also.
Correct. Correct.
So that's
Yeah. So on a high level, what things we can build, what things we will build later, or what are the high priority ones. If we get those things done, maybe we can look at the other ones. So scope uh, would mean something along those lines. So yeah, so project has scope. Thanks, Mithun. Okay, so the next is the process, right? The process that we are going to follow to build the product using our project is should be agile. Okay, so now we are going to build this Lego castle using materials, instructions, and so you to build this you need skills. Like if you don't have play skills to build a, you've not played with Lego before, you need to learn how to play with Lego, right? So you need skills, and you might need instruction. Like for example, if it's like in some of these, have you? I'm sure you have played with Lego, right? So you get this, or any kind of building blocks, toys with building blocks. So there's like a small leaflet with instructions on how to build. You don't have to follow it, but it tells you, okay, if you do this, you can build this thing, right? So it's a guide, but you don't really need to follow it. But if you follow it, you can also build it. You're also free to experiment and figure out how you're going to build this, right? So and so the process uh, on how we build this. So we can't, if you're working alone, let's say, it's just you who's writing your own software, like, I don't know, some of this, so then you don't have any stakeholders. You might have a timeline and a budget, but you won't have any stakeholders to report to or anything like that. You can you can figure out what you're going to do and so on, and then build it in whatever way you want. So the process that you're going to adapt can be anything you want, right? But since we have stakeholders, and since we have timeline, budgets, and there's project scope, right? We need to find a process that allows us to build this, getting all these requirements met. The project requirements have to be met by the process in order to build the product. That's the story here. So, is that, are you clear on that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, the process we are going to adapt is agile, and and this whole presentation was on a very high level. What a product is, what a project is, and what our process is. Okay, on a high level. So I'm not even going into agile principles because that's granular. That it goes down to one lower level. But on a very high level, these are the four things that we need to remember about whatever process we are adapting. It can be Kanban, it can be agile, it can be Scrum, it can be something else. I don't know, some like so you use I don't know if maybe Apple users might not be using this tool, but I'm sure you would have heard or used Spotify, right? So Spotify they have their own agile process. It's not Scrum, it's not Kanban, but they call it. They have their own. It's not a mix of it either, but they stick to these and they stick to the agile principles. They have time boxes. They don't have a Scrum Master. They have an agile coach. They don't have product owners. They have stakeholders who define what a product is, features and properties and look and feel and all that, right? So anyway, either way, that's a digression. But whatever agile process that we are following should, on a high level, meet these requirements. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Okay, so if you are going to say that we have to use, you know, a particular tool and we have to follow it, and uh, it's causing issues with interactions. What's more important is to interact, is to negotiate, to talk, to discuss uh, over using a particular tool and following a strict process. So processes and tools shouldn't be strict; they should be flexible, and more emphasis should be given to uh, individuals and interactions. So people interacting with people, talking, discussing, and coming up with solutions through discussion. Okay? Working software over comprehensive documentation. So if we don't have, because our goal is to build the product and the features of at least things that the client can use. So working software is basically features that the client can use over documentation. So we find it's one thing to have documentation. Documentation gives clarity, gives it tells how we build things, how we are going to build things, what things we worked on, and things like that. I'm not saying none of these say that processes and tools are not needed, or documentation is not required. What it says is that working software is more important than having uh, very comprehensive documentation. Okay, that we should have sufficient documentation to build working software. Our processes and tools should be such that we would allow individuals and to interact and discuss and work closely. Okay, it shouldn't get in the way of interactions. It shouldn't the documentation shouldn't get in the way of building working software. Okay. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So if there is a contract that says there should be a door that's brown, we should be able to negotiate, and the client should be also flexible enough to we should be able to collaborate and convince, and the client should be able to listen, and that requires a bit of faith, that requires a bit of building trust with the client. Okay, So if the client trusts, has faith in us and trusts us and saying and takes our recommendations and suggestions positively, it's easy to collaborate with. It's easy to negotiate details in a contract with the client. So that's what we should be looking at. We should be proactive. We should understand what the client's budgets, uh, on a high level, what the product is going to do, and all that. That's where understanding what the product does and all these things about the product is important. Okay, and also when it comes to the project, the timelines and budgets, or understanding all that is also important. Okay. So that's about customer collaboration, right? So then responding to change or following a plan. So because things change, the clients talk to people, they talk to other people, they get feedback, they see other things, they see advertisements, they see competing products, and uh, responding to change. If the client wants us to build a tower instead of castle, we should be open to it, and we should try to understand why. And they should be able to also say, the reason why we're telling you to do this is because of this, the markets have changed and so on, right? So, but then we can't go and say, hey, but we agreed that this is the plan, and why are we changing it? And it's like, well, the reason why we're changing is because of this particular reason. And same thing with us. Let's say there's something. Let's say we had a plan, and we need to change because something changed in that. In some. Let's say, for example, we can't. We don't have. We can't find particular parts to build something, right? So we've made plans based on a particular set of materials and tools, and also timeline and budgets and all that plan, all some things uh, that we planned had changed. So we need to be able to respond to that change. Okay, that's what agile. That's what this process is all about. So whatever process that follows, that we are following. Sorry about that. So whatever process that we are following should, on a high level, meet these. We should try to stick to these 4 values. Okay. So that's what I wanted to discuss today. Um, any questions, any opinions, any feedback on this?
So Shehal, once a change request comes to a project, so do we have a separate committee where we take care of the change request, and whether we'll be checking whether we can do it or not, and get into an idea, and then we'll be back to the client. So how that process goes on?
Okay, so our presentation was about understanding what products are, what projects are, and what processes are. Yeah. So
Okay.
on a high level. So if you're starting a project, we should have on a high level, we should have this understanding.
Yeah.
Right. So we should know what the product is. We should know how we are going to plan on building it, basically the project, right? And the process.
Okay.
So whatever things that we are going to talk about with the client and sales team and everybody else should have all these things looked at on a high level. Okay. Otherwise, what happens is we would analyze, or we would put more weight on, or we would over look at what a product is, and not look at how we're going to do it, how we're going to build it, and what things what issues we might face when we're building it.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah. It's some products have failed because like especially some of the big construction projects have kind of, I mean, I don't want to be very political, but there are like controversies on, how the port and the airports, and sometimes we pick the wrong place to put something, and everything about the product is fine, the project is fine, but sometimes one of those things might not be right, and if you're not transparent about it, and we hide it, and it gets done, and then we find that we can't use the product. Yeah. So there have been a lot of, a lot of prototypes that have been built, but the whole point of a prototype is to understand that, but that's a different thing. But understanding these three things throughout the project, whether it's at the beginning or whether we are in the process of building it, is important.
Okay.
That's why I brought this up, because it's nothing to do. It says this is required right throughout the cycle, and even after that, actually. So like there are projects that we have kind of archived, and then they're coming up now, right? So see, even resurrecting the project or the product is also, I don't know, we might have to look at that also. If it's a dead product, how do you resurrect it? I don't know. I'm just saying that because clients come back to us, and right. So yeah.
Shehal, it's not really a question. I just want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
So, security kind of likes concrete processes, right? I mean, like if an external auditor sees that we've given access to someone without getting the proper authorization or a ticket, or if it's not documented, they kind
Yeah.
of tend to blow gasket, right?
Yeah.
So, but in Agile, we see that giving the access is more important than documenting.
No.
So,
That's wrong.
what do you think?
Okay, that's a misconception. So
Mhm.
Agile doesn't say that. Agile doesn't say that you need to be flexible enough to compromise certain things, because look, these are features. So you don't compromise on the features. If security is a feature, privacy is a feature, you don't compromise. Same thing with process, right? So if it's got limited, if it's got things that we need to restrict and control, we have to do that. Because see, where does that say? Because none of the agile values say that, right? So you can't say, well, we're following agile, so be flexible enough not to have security restrictions on this particular thing. It's like, no, I mean, you can't do that. If that happens, you need to escalate, and then we'll get to that on another presentation, escalation and things like that, right? So there's yeah. Does that answer your question? Because if
Yeah.
you're the custodian, you're a stakeholder, right? And see how it's done is like, so if somebody's asking you for to loosen security and privacy constraints, right? And you say no, you can't do it, and then this is the whole thing where collaboration and interactions are, that's where it's important. So you need to, the discussion is always a very is promoted. So if you can't negotiate, and if you can't discuss something and come to some consensus, come to understanding, then that's an issue. Then that has to be escalated again, right? So usually negotiations and discussions work.
I think, Shehal,
Yeah.
sorry, can I add something here?
Yeah, sure.
So what I felt was that the minimum documentation to be is always useful. I mean, I understand from client perspective, if they go through some audit or some due diligence, it will help them. But at the same time, they shouldn't be rigid with that also, because to accommodate agile, that's what I use.
Yes, correct. So the documentation is important. Documentation is important for a lot of reasons. It explains things because some of the features in the product won't be built, right? So, and you might have future plans, and you might have regulation and other things that we need to look at, right? So documentation is important, right? I'm not saying it's not, and Agile is also not saying it's not. There should be documentation. There should be. The purpose is that it provides transparency. So because otherwise, so what this says is, don't let comprehensive documentation go put more. Don't put more weight, more emphasis on comprehensive documentation than trying to get working software done. We need to look at getting working software done. We also need documentation, because otherwise we don't know what we did, because we can't, we're human, we don't remember a lot of things, right? So it's important that we document things. That's a given. But building working software is more important. So if somebody is using these agile values to not document something, that's also not a good thing. But that's not what agile says also. So, it's not what this process is about. Does that make sense? None of the things on the left side, none of the things on the right side, processes and tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, following a plan. Agile is not saying they are not important. They're important, but what's on the left is more important, right? So because if we don't have a plan, we can't do things. But if there's a change to come, if a change is happening, we need to respond to that change rather than trying to follow the plan that we set out. Okay. Anything you would like to add? So we will continue a small short series like this. That's not, I don't know, I hope this is not too heavy and too complicated to understand.
Yeah, it's clear, Shehal. It's not that heavy.
All right, we can conclude if there are no, if there's nothing to add or discuss.